It's Behavioural Economics on a Post-it, number 40. Reciprocity. Reciprocity is occupied, or discussions of reciprocity have occupied, I think, an increasingly prominent place in behavioural public policy as the field has been developing. But also an increasingly prominent place, I think, within the discipline of economics generally. I mean, Adam, as I've sort of indicated in previous videos, people, founding fathers of economics such as Adam Smith and David Hume, talked really extensively about what is essentially reciprocity. But the notion of reciprocity it was kind of not dismissed, but it was kind of overlooked, I think, increasingly in the development of economics, especially neoclassical economics throughout the 20th century. But as I've said, it's made, I think it's making an increasingly prominent comeback. Behavioural economists have worked quite extensively, or some behavioural economists have worked extensively on reciprocity, particularly Ernst Fair in terms of empirical observation. Ernst Fair and his colleagues in terms of empirical observations. But reciprocity is a huge topic, and it's discussed across a huge range of disciplines, really, all the way from sort of animal behavioralism, anthropology, sociology, political science, philosophy, as I've said, economics, etc., etc. So it's discussed extensively within almost all of the social sciences and a lot of the sciences as well, and the humanities as well, of course. Now, strangely, I think, to me at least, there was a period from sort of 1980s, 1990s onwards, whereby in terms of public policy analysis, public policy discussions, reciprocity didn't take up much space at all. The focus was on the dichotomy, really, between pure altruism, whether people were motivated by pure altruism or whether they were motivated by this sort of selfish egoism that is the caricature that underpins standard rational choice theory. So the two ends are, whether people are unconditional givers, pure altruists, or whether they're unconditional takers, really. They're just selfish egoists. And I think many people have recognised recently, or in recent years, that humans generally fall somewhere in the middle, most of the time, much of the time, not all of the time, but much of the time. So that is to say that they are conditional givers and conditional takers, so to speak. People return kind actions with kindness, if we can classify these things as being kind, or unkind actions and behaviours they return those with unkind actions and behaviours, often labelled as sort of punishments. Right. So, as I said, it's a huge topic, so huge, in fact, that I did write a book on it myself a couple of years ago. Here's the book, if you're interested. Reciprocity and the Art of Behavioural Public Policy. That was published by Cambridge University Press in 2019. I apologise for plugging my book. I always feel uncomfortable about doing that, but nobody else is going to do it for me, are they? Not unless I'm particularly kind to them, I guess. Okay. Now, obviously, I could give probably a whole university degree on the topic of reciprocity, really, but I'm just going to present one study that seemed to show that people were motivated by reciprocal instincts to some extent. There's quite an old study. It was published in 1964. There's been a huge amount of empirical observations of reciprocity since then, but this is the one that I'm just going to present very briefly here. And kind of may indicate to some degree that reciprocity is this kind of almost an innate instinct, if you like, that resides within most people much of the time. And I think it's because, as I've alluded to in previous videos, it's because when you act reciprocally, the evolution of reciprocity came about because it's basically good for the group. If you return good actions or kind actions with kindness, or beneficial actions with beneficial actions with beneficial actions, and ultimately that will be good for the group as a whole. And similarly, if you punish those that transcend, that violate these kind of reciprocal expectations, then you discourage people perhaps from behaving selfishly egoistically, right? And if too many people do behave selfishly, then obviously that's bad for the group. So reciprocity evolved, I think, because it's good for the group, and by extension, it's good for the individuals that live within those groups. So it's not underpinned, I don't think, usually by an altruistic sense. It's underpinned really by a self-interested sense, but kind of an enlightened form of self-interest that goes over and above selfish egoism, because what's good for those fellow citizens or the fellow members of your group collectively is likely to be good for you yourself in the long run. So this is the study anyway that I'm just going to run through very briefly, by Adams and Jacobson, 1964. And they hired students to proofread galley proofs. And they split those students into three groups. Group one, they told them that they were unqualified for the task to earn 30 cents per page at least, but they were going to be paid that anyway. Right? Group two, they told that they were unqualified to earn 30 cents per page, so they'd be paid 20 cents per page instead, in an American context. And then group three, they were told that they were qualified to earn 30% per page, and they would be paid 30 cents per page. There was no difference really between the different members of the group. They were just told this. Right? And what they found, of the three groups, those in group one worked the hardest of the three groups and produced the best quality work. So it seemed that those people that thought that they were being treated well returned that by putting in a lot of effort and producing good quality work over and above the other two groups. Those that might have been perceived that they've been treated relatively badly, and those that thought that they were just being paid what they deserved. Right? So there seemed to be an element of reciprocity going on. So I've said the lesson there, and as I've said, there's a huge number of further studies that have demonstrated the importance of reciprocity, but for the purposes of here, I just thought I'd point out this one. If you treat people well, they will treat you well much of the time, one hopes, right? It has huge public policy implications. Now, that's it. That concludes this series. That's the 40 behavioural economic and the post-its that I wanted to present to you in the form of videos. Some of you know that there was a poster that was produced on the 40 behavioural economics on a post-its, and they can, I've sold a load of those, but it takes a lot of effort to produce those posters. So I don't produce those posters anymore. But for those of you who are interested in using the behavioural economics on a post-it series, perhaps to try to teach people some basics in behavioural economics and behavioural public policy, or if you want to learn those things yourself, there is a video wall of all of the behavioural public policy or behavioural economics on a post-it videos now. And they can all be viewed on my YouTube channel. So I hope at least some people have managed to get something useful out of this series.